Tommy Scoops with you here for another great week of coverage here at SoccerWise. I did my weekend recap show yesterday. If you want to go back and listen, I recorded it. And then I went and I re-recorded it because Sporting Kansas City, for the first time, basically, since muskets were replaced with actual rifles, have changed their manager, and Peter Vermes is now out, the longest tenured manager in MLS history. We will talk all about it coming up. We've got a lot of coverage for you. We've got CONCACAF Champions Cup to preview, US Open Cup second round, some signings made in Chicago and Seattle, a potential ownership change in Salt Lake City. No rest for the weary, Tom. How are you? How was your weekend? How much did you miss me?
I'm good. I always miss you guys. What kind of question is that? How was your weekend? How are you doing?
I'm good. The New York Mets are in town. I think I was talking about it last week. So baseball started, and I went to the game yesterday for the first time to Lone Depot Stadium, and I walked.
Is that what it's called now?
Yeah, it is called Lone Depot. And I walked home. That's the dream, right? Basically, it was basically Highbury or Anfield. That's what happened to me. So you basically walk out and you're just in Little Havana. And I don't live that far away, so you wander around and maybe grab a beverage or two. The weather's nice.
Action.
There's chickens screaming everywhere. It was like the full-on experience, and I was hyped about it. And I was stoked because I was like, Tom would love this, because I went into Bodega, grabbed a drink or two, thought about Miller Lights, and was like, nah, I don't need to just for the bit. I can drink whatever I want. And then I walked out and walked home, and it was a really good time. Otherwise, this weekend I spent watching soccer on top of soccer on top of soccer. It was a pretty good time. A lot of spaced out games between NWSL and MLS, so I enjoyed it.
Yeah, that was nice. That was nice. Did you pick up a torpedo bat while you were there? Hit a couple dingers?
I did not pick up a torpedo bat. What's the comp for, because this is what everyone has to do that creates any form of content, right?
The hacky
thing. Let's take a thing that's socially relevant and let's turn it into our thing.
Bro, all I gotta say is, even before going to that, nerds take it back in my day, you just took steroids like a man and ruined your body. You didn't hire an MIT nerd to work within the rules and create a new baseball bat.
Yeah.
Dorks.
No, for sure. Game is totally ruined now compared to that. We did have a couple fans, I think, that sent us pictures of their playing cards they had of the Tommy Scoops baseball player that
was funny.
Performed on the show last
funny.
Thursday, which was good to have. My guess would be it would be something in cleats, like being able to put something that allows you to strike the ball a little bit harder in a cleat.
A corked cleat.
A corked cleat, yeah. Just a small piece of slate, right on the inside above your big toe, so that when you strike through a ball, it explodes.
Whatever steel Christian Benteke clearly has under his forehead, we need to check if that's actually his skull, because that is a lethal weapon and just an absolute cheat code. So maybe that's it.
Kalen Carr helmet that makes the ball fly off your head even faster, even stronger.
Oh, hold on. We should get off the baseball meeting before we get into the real show. I got to play soccer last night with former MLS legend Stephen Keel. I got him in to come to my men's league. I was so happy. And I've been trying to when we transitioned to over 30, I was like, Keel, I know you're not that far. Do you want to play? I was like, hey, I don't know if I can commit to everything. And in reality, he needed to make sure to see that the team was good enough for his standards. Dude, I don't think he had a single bad touch. He was nothing but positive too. We won. Just everything. He's a force of nature. And I was just so happy to have Keel on the field. And then in normal Keel fashion, we're just talking after the game, and I'm like, hey man, thanks again for coming. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was up to your standard, because you can come back literally whatever you want. And again, he was the best player on the field, obviously. And then still, his text back to me, he's like, "Oh, dude, that was so much fun. No, man, you played great. What about your goal?" Or nice. And I was like, "Oh man, what a leader! What a leader! I need to give him sporting director jobs, except nobody wants that for a men's league team." But that brings it, because the Kalen, and we're talking in the group chat after, and I was like, man. As desperate as I was to leave a positive impression on Keel, I'm worried about playing with Kalen Carr and thus ruining the mystique around the group chat pickup stories. Not for him, because I know he would kill it. It's would he be disappointed in just that I either didn't get in a fight, get a red card, or do something extraordinary in just an average game? So I'm worried.
I would say if you were playing with that level of worry, the odds that you don't come in late on a tackle and cause a fight are probably pretty low.
And then, am I just doing this to impress Kalen?
Yeah.
And in reality, he's probably like, you're a lunatic.
Also, he's the last person who wants that, because the thing I found out when I played with him is as games get more physical, it's worse for the most skilled player on the field.
Yeah, because
his life gets worse if you get more physical. So there's no like, oh, defend me type stuff. It's like, please ratchet that stuff down so that when I meg people and when I cut back on people, I just love the first few times I played with him, I was like, oh, you can play out on the wing, you can play up top, right? I watch you play soccer. And then like pretty early in every game, he's like, yeah, I'm going to play in the middle because I'm the best player on the field. And you're like, oh, okay, well, that's not what your MLSsoccer.com card says. It says you're a forward. So I don't know if you could play nines in central midfield right now. And, oh, yeah, right. Then we could just play to your feet. That will probably work as well.
That was Keel was like, hey, man, where do you... And I was like, you're Stephen Keel. You tell me where do you want to play. He goes, I'll just help with the team, however. And I was like, this is nice. Cut the shit. Where do you want to play? And he was like, I was like, okay, well, center back or center mid. I'm leaning center mid, but if you want to play in the back, that's cool too.
Yeah.
He gets on the field. He's like, where do you want me to go? Is it stand in the middle, please?
Now, I will say this. It is not a guarantee. I have put together some squads, especially when it was like, oh, we don't have anyone. Can people fill in? Of like former professional players where it does not go well. There's like a level of expectation that they're like, I'm only going to do this. And so you have to do all these other things. Or expectations of like, oh, if I just ping this full field cross, you'll bring it down and then you'll put it back on your second touch. And you're like, yeah, sorry, that's not normally how we play. So sometimes it can be, I'm just saying it's not a guarantee. So you got a good situation.
Unbelievable.
Pressing. Did you win?
We won, yeah.
Did he do 3 in the pocket? No, he didn't.
No. He's probably trying to be reserved, trying to be respectful. He did have the wristband on, and when I saw him put it on when we were like near the bench, like putting on our cleats, I was like, oh my God. I'm so juiced. Like, I just wanted him to bring back his old, like, didn't have a haircut for, like, if he didn't for, like, 6 months, get that back. But I tell you, man, pressing with Stephen Keel, I felt like I could have played for the Red Bulls. Because he was like, hold, go, and I was like, yes. And then, like, that, my goal was on a pressing sequence with Keel. I was just looking at him, I was like, I want you to narrate everything I did. Anyway, shout out Stephen Keel. I doubt he's listening.
Gets the head down, wins it back, goes to goal. What a moment from Tommy Scoops.
Jumped into
Keel's arms. It's inspirational. I have to shout out Colorado right now. I would be remiss because I think my brother-in-law grew up playing with Stephen Keel in Colorado on like the ODP teams and stuff.
Yeah.
So shout out to the great state of Colorado. And shout out to the Loons in the chat who says, my dad always said when he was a kid, there was a kicker in the NFL who was missing half his foot. So he had a flat pitching wedge type surface.
Oh, yeah.
Able to hit them from. Nick Murray, of course, the legend, follows up with, that was Tom Dempsey, who used to hold the record for longest field goal. I don't think cutting off half your foot is the same as creating a torpedo bat. There's a bit more commitment to that, and I don't think as many people are going to do that. I understand the concept, but I think this would be
you don't get the grind, bro.
Yeah, this would be a bit more of the cleat change. I mean, maybe it would be goalkeeper gloves that are a little bit different. Soccer doesn't really have that type of stuff, right? More of the stuff is like, oh, someone lays down behind the wall. Now all of a sudden, 2 months later in the world, everyone lays down behind the wall. It's like stuff like that, where it's a bit more ingenuity of like style of play or things you do than actual equipment. But if anyone has a good idea of what the torpedo bat version in soccer would be, I would absolutely take that and would be happy to steal it as my own idea, create it, sell it to a team, put a patent on it, and then make
just say you went to MIT.
Freak out about it.
Just say you went to MIT and you got it.
I did go to MIT.
If you say that you went to MIT and just said that you did this long-standing, deep analytical research on why actually playing 4-4-2 and lumping it forward, mate, is the way to go analytically, I think you could convince somebody to like get it started until somebody like, you know, maybe a lower level where they don't have the resources to check your work.
This would be like if someone went the full long throw-in route and was like, all I do is train long throw-ins. I teach people how to take long throw-ins, and I can come to your team if you pay me enough, and then I can teach you all long throw-ins.
And then it's just you showing dudes how to curl?
Pretty much, but I would be there being like, actually, throw-ins are kind of lame. Just throw it in quickly and start playing. I hate throw-ins, and I know I think there is some statistical ideas now of like, anytime it's in the attacking half, try and throw it into the box. You gain an advantage, all that stuff. I find throw-ins so boring.
But that's why you need to do it that way. But you need to do it that way. That makes it less boring.
It's still boring. Just eliminate it. You play to
Eliminate
restart
throw-ins.
play. You play on the ground. You can't put the ball in the air, and no one
I was
can
gonna
stand
say-
within 3 yards. And then we play.
That's stupid. That's
I
stupid.
didn't. I don't sign up to watch people throw the ball back in. That's not what I'm here for.
Is this a thing that really needs to be fixed? I feel like there's a very small part of the game that I
Interesting.
think is going to be okay.
Interesting. Well, you have to have a product committee, right? You always have to be working
The Soccer
on
Wise Product
something.
Committee.
This could be something that Peter Vermes could take over in his free time now. Let's move into our first big topic here of the day. I did my weekend recap yesterday. A big thank you to some of the awesome members of our Discord community who are Sporting Kansas City fans, and they were putting their thoughts in the morning, and I recorded, then I went to re-record so that I could redo the show and lead it with the massive news that Peter Vermes was stepping down, and I used a bunch of their comments to sort of give what I thought was a really accurate description of how KC fans were feeling and how big a moment this was and the reality of what was occurring yesterday. I took this quote from, or at least this line from, I think it was Alex Abnos' piece at The Guardian, one of our good friends, shout out to Abnos,
Our guy.
who wrote that Peter Vermes at 58 was the longest tenured skipper in MLS, having originally taken over as interim coach in 2009. He also owned the fourth longest active managerial tenure in the world before his firing. His 15-year, 7-month, 24-day tenure stands as the 38th longest tenure by any soccer manager in the world since the Second World War. When you are using world wars as reference points, you are in rarefied air. Peter Vermes coached 609 matches for Sporting Kansas City across all competitions, more than half the games in the club's 30-year existence. No figure in MLS history has coached more. He is third all-time in MLS regular season wins. He is the only person in MLS history to have won an MLS Cup as a player and then as a coach for the same club. He was originally sporting director, then interim coach, then head coach. He won 4 trophies, 3 U.S. Open Cups, and the MLS Cup in 2013. But of course, this team didn't make the playoffs last year. Their winless streak, as I said yesterday, runs back 10 matches now through the end of last season and the opening 6 matches of this season. And so Peter Vermes has parted ways with Sporting Kansas City, and they are into a new reality. We were on the press conference call with ownership a few moments ago. Yeah, big J journalism there. I asked 0 questions because I didn't want to get in the way. I'm, purely observing everything that's going on. But Tom, just sort of give me an idea of when you first heard this coming around, your thoughts, your reactions, and what you've sort of digested about this over the last 24 to 48 hours.
I got a lot of texts from people across the league, coaches, GMs, front offices, like agents, right? The overwhelming sentiment was, I can't believe they actually did it, or this actually happened. We have, even as this show, guys, haven't had a discussion of should he be fired or should there be a change, because it would just be, then particularly it was last year when he signed the new contract, it was just like, this is a waste of time. This is an exercise in time wasting. Why are we talking about something that is not going to happen? Let's use resources on other things. So that was the overarching feeling. Given the results, particularly over the last year and 13, 14 games, dating back to last year. But even going back to their 23 season where they had a strong end of the year and beat St. Louis in round 1 of the playoffs. Even then, it's been super shaky, since 21, 22? I believe that he deserved several continuing chances or to continue to go. It wasn't going to be a quick trigger, and he's earned that. So it wasn't about whether or not should this happen on merit. It was, I'm surprised that it did, because there hasn't been a time, first of all, Sporting Kansas City does not exist without Peter Vermes. I don't think that there is a singular other person in this league that is so synonymous with one club and one club's success that it just feels weird that we just did a Sporting Kansas City press conference and Vermes wasn't on it. We're going to watch a game this weekend where he's not on the sideline. There's going to be press conferences, there's going to be discussions. It's it's going to take a minute to get used to, because this is all this club has ever known. This is all what we've known in terms of consuming this league, first as fans and then as media members. So it's a gigantic shift. It's one that I think is the right decision to happen. I would have, we're going to get into it deeper, but I will say where things should have been different, I think, over the last year, where other changes could have been made to better prepare for this day, but we'll get into that later. It's just the overarching feeling that I do want to go to is this is a legend of this club, obviously, legend of this league. There are few people as important to American soccer, to Major League Soccer, I should say, than Peter Vermes. And I do hope that that's his legacy, and I do think with a little bit of time, more people are going to say, like, because right now it's, oh my God, like, if you're a fan that wanted him out, the KC Cauldron, their supporters, formally said that he should resign this weekend, and then he was fired. And so there's a lot of that sentiment, but I think as time goes, more and more people are going to be talking glowingly about Peter Vermes, as they should be.
I think that's right. I think it's there are very few times where sports legacies end on a high. It's just hard because a lot of times they wouldn't end then. And that I said yesterday on the show, like a couple different times, a couple different ways, he, to his credit, probably got let go because of the product of the success he had and the expectations he created at the club, and the belief that the club should compete for trophies and they should compete at a high level in MLS and across continental competition and US Open Cups and all that type of stuff. And so in failure to do that now, he had set the bar that he was no longer matching. There are a lot more things going on, I think, with Sporting Kansas City than just Peter Vermes. But when you talk about him, like, you're talking about someone who should probably have a statue. And if not, there should be a stand or an end, whatever it is. He, of course, crossed over in a really interesting time in Major League Soccer, right? He took over a team, and I think, I haven't read it, so I apologize to Matt Doyle. I think Doyle talked about the Man U friendly at Arrowhead and all of that. And I think Weeby talked about this in his thread that he sort of did, talking about first covering the team and everything. But they played in a minor league baseball stadium, or they played in an empty NFL stadium. They were irrelevant in Major League Soccer. They were irrelevant in Kansas City. And he then crossed over into a period of gaining relevance that Sporting KC led Major League Soccer in. It was the LA Galaxy in Sporting Kansas City from 2010 to 2013 and 14, RSL in there as well, that like pushed the next generation of the league. Seattle was a huge part of that. And then Toronto getting Javinko and changing sort of their trajectory was a massive part of that. And then that brings Atlanta and LAFCs and a ton of other clubs that have done it really well into the fold. But I remember watching from afar when Sporting Park, Livestrong Park, I think it was at the time, opened, and thinking it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. And what he built in a soccer style, right? The high pressing, high intensity style, then transitioning to possession style, success, expectations. It was stuff that had never really happened before, or hadn't happened in that way in MLS. And DC set a mark early in the 90s under Bruce Arena, and the Galaxy shifted that a little and continued things on. But what Sporting Kansas City became when they changed to Sporting Kansas City, and I said yesterday, Columbus has now done it, but I don't think any other original team has regained relevance the way Sporting Kansas City has done it, going from Kansas City Wizards to Sporting KC. Peter Vermes' fingerprints are across all of that. And he was able, to a really large extent, to stay relevant for a long time as the league changed then really quickly. Like, the league has shifted so much in terms of spending and global exposure. I remember an interview with Peter Vermes that I did where he said recruiting players used to be 80% agents coming to you and 20% scouting. And it has now flipped in MLS because we have the resources to scout, which to his credit means he shifted the way he operated and worked as the league grew and as it moved forward. He built the training ground, which is a huge thing, up until US Soccer finally now putting shovels in the ground in Atlanta, funded by Arthur Blank. It was like the only national training center that had been built, and it was built for the purpose of coaching education, which is a massive issue in the United States and probably one of the main ways we take steps forward, as well as, I think, refereeing education. So a ton of work that he did on and off the field has changed the game and changed that market. Like, Kansas City is going to be a World Cup market. I don't know that Kansas City is, in when you talk about markets in the United States, elevated into that category very often, but their strength as a soccer community has allowed them to sort of battle maybe above their weight in many different conversations when it's hosting Copa Americas and Gold Cups and massive USMNT games, US Women's National Team games, and now a World Cup as well. So he's involved in a ton of that. But as the league has shifted, I think parts of Sporting Kansas City have fallen behind.
100%.
I think some of that falls to him. And I think we're about to find out how much of it is him papering over cracks. And I think when you talk about a lot of managers like this, and I think to the Arsene Wengers of the world and all of that, the manager and the face of the team becomes pain sponges. But if the Sporting Kansas City ownership group wanted to come in and spend $25 million on Emmanuel Latte-Loth, I don't think Peter Vermes was going to say no. And in the press conference that we were just in, Jeff Carlisle read a quote from Peter Vermes this offseason about how they haven't really caught up in spending in the league and things have stagnated.
Yep.
And a large part of Peter Vermes' success, I talked about this a little yesterday, was off this core of super draft picks that were able to play for him for basically a decade. 3 World Cup starters in Graham Zusi, Roger Espinoza, and Matt Beasler, the Kai Kamaras of the world, the CJ Sapongs, Dom Dwyers, and then some other really smart moves inside of MLS in which they were able to miss and hit off and on big international signings, but they were able to maintain success because their core was really strong. And as that core has now gone off and retired, they haven't been able to replace them, and they haven't been able to hit as well on newer signings. But I don't know how much of that extent is Peter Vermes' failure in identifying the right players or coaching them, and how much is a lot of the DPs I named yesterday that didn't hit, those are TAM level players.
Exactly.
And so part of what Sporting Kansas City has done has not really been operating in modern MLS.
That's the thing. They did not find a way to transition into the next, probably 2 eras of Major League Soccer. The Galaxy were much worse at failing to go into the TAM era. Obviously, they are completely back after winning MLS Cup, but it took them a while to adhere or adapt to the new league. And that, hey, like, just because you're the Galacticos, the Galaxy, you can't just go sign, like, hey, Beckham and Robbie Keane and Lance Armstrong, that worked out great. All right, let's do Gerrard. Let's do Nigel Young. Let's do whatever, right? And these ones that didn't work out. And then, Douglas Costa, of course. Yeah, in 2012, that was sick. Not in 2022.
Yeah.
And so it took them a little while. And again, Kansas City was in a different way because that's not how they built their teams. But the Super Draft has less and less of an impact. It is still a way that you can find undervalued players. If you're really good at developing, which Peter Vermes and this Kansas City group was, you can still find players. But it is never going to be the backbone of a team like it was for that dominant Kansas City run, their best run. From 2011 to 18, they made the playoffs every year. They won 4 major trophies, 1 MLS Cup, 3 Open Cups. That was all on the backs of Zusi, Beasler, Espinoza as the foundation. And then Dom Dwyer for a little bit, or again, Kai Kamara wasn't a super draft pick, but he was somebody they got from within the league. Yeah, like these players, like that, the foundation of that team was the super draft. Whereas now, if you get one dude in the super draft that becomes a regular guy, that's a great success. Steven Afrifa was somebody that great super draft pick. Not only is he not like the core guy, it's just him. Like he's like Doyle wrote this really well, and you alluded to it before. I read that piece; it was an excellent piece. And Doyle really laid out this timeline where it was like pretty much like 2 times over the last decade they've gotten a regular starter or a key contributor in the super draft. So they haven't adapted to the new league. And you go to spending, and Mike Ilitch took that question from Jeff Carlisle, and that was the first time that he kind of like bit back just a little bit, where he was like, I don't know that there's been a time where Peter asked for something and didn't get it. Yeah. More as like, why is he saying this in an interview that we're not spending more when he could have, like, and 2 owners, like they did do the Gotti Kinda and Alan Polito was the same window. That was like, $12 million in transfer fees. That was significant. But it was then, and then it was this winter when they brought in Jovic, Manu Garcia, right? Like everything else has been, as you say, 10 level players. And you cannot compete in MLS like that. And
I don't know that Jovic and Manu Garcia is competing at the high end of MLS in terms of spending.
It's not, but okay. I don't want to be the podcast that sits here and says that every team has to spend like Atlanta or every team and because then Columbus becomes an air quote low spending team and then right, like it's all relative, right? there's a baseline for me, so just so that it does, we keep moving the goalposts every year of like, well, somebody else did a $4 million, now you have to do $5 million, and now you have no ambition, even though you had ambition 3 years ago. There's a baseline to spend that they have not hit. And again, this is going to mirror, in some ways, the Montreal conversation in that of like, again, we're not asking you to sign do $10 million fee for Alan Polito and somebody like that every year, every 2 years. It's like, but you need to be doing it every couple years of, like, it can't just be a one-time thing. It can't just be a reaction to, oh, well, we stunk this year. Okay, here's all the money, right? Yeah. Like, so that's where they went wrong in not being able to adapt. And my last point, because I've been rambling too much, I still think if, and this is a false premise because there's no way he would have agreed to it. He earned all of the control. If there was a way to hire a sporting director that was actually above him, and not whatever Mike Burns is now. Not the Brian, but like they worked for Peter.
Which wasn't, Mike Illig didn't deny that. He said, we brought Mike Burns in to sit alongside Peter Vermes, and Peter Vermes was our CEO and final decision maker.
If there was a way to get, again, insert Ernst Tanner or even, Chris Albright, John Thornton, name whoever your favorite sporting director is in across the league. A guy like that, to be the sporting director, and Peter Vermes, you can still have a say, but it's not your final decision. You're the head coach. I think he's still coach because I think Peter Vermes, the sporting director, is much more at fault than Peter Vermes, the head coach.
Yeah, I wonder how much of it is split responsibility. I do wonder if, let's say he decides he wants to be involved again, if another club looks at him, where they choose him. Like, I do wonder now going forward, does a club hire him as a full-time sporting director and let someone else coach? You think that everyone views him as a great coach and a not very good sporting director. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's fair. And I think you see that in a lot of the signings as I went through on our depth charts and looking at salaries, looking at where they've spent. The high-level TAM signings for them have missed over and over again. I mean, center back is a clear one we talk about, but we talk about center back. They're paying $800,000 to $1 million to a lot of players who have played center back for them, who have not been able to play up to the level. They've elevated a number of players they had already signed into high-level TAM signings. Some deserve, some not. You look at a Daniel Shallowy and you ask, $1.3 million, like, is that what he's worth? And what does it require for a player like that to be good, where that you then have to go spend other places, which means, can you have him on that salary cap number? And a lot of other pieces for them. Like, they have struggled to replace positions across the field, and they've struggled to do it where they've made some tries on signings. Now, a lot of their guys have been high salaries, free signings. Like, they haven't paid transfer fees, and so maybe the salaries are elevated, but they had this belief that they could, like, find these diamonds in the rough, and it has worked sometimes, like in Ilie Sanchez, although, again, they didn't put him in the right position to be super successful for them, and it hasn't worked more times than it has. No. And that's where I think you talk about things getting stale, and maybe Peter felt like he had to go and look for these things. I thought that quote was really interesting, like you said, because the comment was, I don't know a time when Peter asked for something and didn't get it. And so now we're stuck in a world post-Peter where the question that we're asking is, was this Peter Vermes holding the team back or not wanting to spend more or not feeling like they could or not doing it well? Or is that where the club stands, and is that who they are? They, as I talked about the training grounds and stuff, right, they were pretty progressive in building out their academy and their two-team. For anyone who wasn't around at the time, the recruiting run to get Gianluca Busio was a huge moment where this was a player from, at the time, an unaffected region, so he could go wherever he wanted. He had this future a lot of people expected. He chose to go to Kansas City, and they were able to work him through their farm team, through their system, and then sell him on, Eric Palmer-Brown and all of that. There has not been nearly enough output, though, from that system for them to be able to sustain. Because the reality was, even if you talk about MLS changing with Superdraft, from 2000 to 2010, no one was hitting at the rate that Sporting Kansas City did.
Right.
So the odds that were going to continue never happened. And my idea always was, great, you're ahead of the curve. Now you have time to build your academy system out so that the next set of Graham Zusis and Matt Beaslers and Roger Espinosas come through your academy, and you can rebuild that core. And they were never able to do that. And that is, I think, one of the huge sticking points for them was you were either supposed to build those players in and have them be the next version. I think Jake Davis is going to be one. but you need 5 of those, or you sell them and then you use that money to reinvest in that 27-year-old center back who's going to be there for 4 or 5 years and helps other players come through. So there's a lot of issues there. There has been, it seems like, an insistence on style over results at times as well, over the last 5-6 years. And in saying all of that, they got to the playoffs 2 years ago. They beat St. Louis in the opening round. And that's going to be like a seminal moment in the history of that club, because that is this regional rival that they finally had. And then they made a U.S. Open Cup last year. So even when they've been bad, there have been some high water marks. And I think that kept Peter Vermes there even long. But now the question is, like, what happens, and what ownership sounded like today, and what I talked about yesterday, and I think you're probably hearing the same, is he was so ubiquitous across the club in so many ways that it is going to take a little while to figure out how this club charts their way forward.
I am worried about that. Because the other side of, build him a statue for everything he's done, they're not at this position without him in any way. But it's his hands on all decisions, not just major, like minor, like all the details, right? Like, there is not like a sporting decision that was made that didn't go through him, and like that extends to the training facility, to I'm sure the methodology and everything else, right? Like, all of this is built on Peter Vermes. And as we're saying, like, things needed to change. You don't change the manager / soccer czar without there being a reason to change things, because it got stale or things need to be different. One quote from Mike Ilitch was, we like, and I will give him credit that he was honest for a couple. He's like, look, we haven't done a coaching search. We don't, we're going to be like, not like learning on the job. He wasn't saying it as if he doesn't know what he's doing, but he's like, I don't know exactly how it's going to go, because we haven't been in this position. Like, this is new for us too, right? And he was saying a couple of those things, but then he goes, the first thing is, if you want something changed, you need it to be different. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Except then Kerry Zavagnin is the interim coach, which great. Except he goes, this is Kerry's job to lose. And okay, so the new era without Peter Vermes is potentially Kerry Zavagnin, head coach, who's been here longer than Peter. He was a player from 2000 to 08, and then immediately in 08, after retired, 09, he's on the coaching staff. And then Mike Burns is the CSO calling the shots, who, again, I talked to people who were interviewed or potentially considering this job that Mike Burns eventually got. Well, for Gavin Wilson and then Mike Burns. It was clear you work for the head coach. And so you're not getting the top number 2s in the league because you're still reporting to somebody. And why, like, particularly the head coach makes it even more difficult. And they knew that, like, they assumed if things go wrong, I'm the guy who gets fired, not Peter Vermes. Yeah. So they weren't getting the cream of the crop of the next potential CSOs. So the future of the brand new Sporting Kansas City without Peter Vermes is his longtime assistant, who's been there even longer than he is, and his friend who they hired to be the sporting director, who I don't even know if he got an interview in MLS since he left New England.
Right.
Like, this is just gonna. My fear is this is gonna be a watered down version of Peter Vermes' Sporting Kansas City, and my fear is that it ends up being a lost year. And even if and when they do make big changes for either a CSO or a head coach or whatever, that, like, we're going to be talking about this again next year, of like, okay, then next year is going to be the transition year. And then so at what point are they the air quote finished product, or at what point do they have the, we're not transitioning anymore, we're into our new era? When is that going to be?
It's really hard to understand, because in this convo of, like you said, Kerry Zavagnin, that convo of like, oh, it's his job to lose, but they also said they're going to go out and do a global search. They've never done it before.
And not one, but 2 consulting firms.
Yes.
Two.
Well, I would assume part of that is because they have to fill 2 roles. And part of that is because they've never done this before. And I say that in that whenever these things happen, we always start to jump into a Rolodex. And we're like, what are the connections? Who is the soccer connections for these people? Is it people that have played for that ownership group, or a CSO, or with a coach, or whatever? And as you just said, everything here goes back to Peter Vermes. So for them to get outside of their echo chamber, they probably need 2 consulting firms to put together lists of people.
It's a lot of power.
Also, Soccer Eyes would like to put itself forward as a potential third consulting.
Why did we start a podcast and not a stupid consulting firm?
We could just do both. Why not do both? We'll talk about it both sides.
If we were smart at business, that's what we would have done.
But we are not, which is why we do a soccer podcast. Good at business,
I wouldn't be able to say things like consuming the text.
The way forward for this is very confusing because then the other side is you talk about the lack of options at for a sporting director last year because you knew the reality. What about coaches now? And like we've said Jim Curtin's name a million times. He's getting paid a lot of money to not coach.
Why would he take this job?
But anyone like him, why would you take a job if there's no CSO? Because whoever you end up working with and reporting to is not hired. And so you don't have buy-in from them. So I don't understand how you hire in this position for coach before CSO.
Maybe did you interpret, or maybe there was maybe something I missed? Like, I'm assuming Mike Burns is CSO. Or like,
it was not worded that way. It was worded that a lot of Peter Vermes' role will fall to him in that front office space, but they're still not really sure. It was not worded that. It wasn't worded in a way in which Mike Burns is running a coaching search. That was never said. Right. And it doesn't feel like that's reality. So I think that's another dangerous spot this team's in.
There are few, in a vacuum, I don't think that the CSO head coach dual role makes sense. But nothing is ever black and white. Chicago doing that for Berhalter made a ton of sense. You're not getting Berhalter without that. It's just not happening. And while Berhalter...
And having someone who's not paying attention to CSO was not worse than what they had going on before.
And like Berhalter too brought in a lot of front office people as well, which I think is a good thing because knows a good thing. So while I'm certain that he still has full control of everything, there's more delegating there to do, right? And like Bruce Arena, same thing. In San Jose, that's how they're going to get him. That's how New England was going to get Bruce, right? There are spots where it makes sense. The only way that I can see a scenario in which Jim Curtin considers Kansas City is with you have full power. And if you're Kansas City, after doing like that with Peter Vermes, which again, particularly at the time, made a ton of sense, everything like completely right. I would not do that again. And so if I'm Jim Curtin, I'm not even taking that phone call. Again, I said this in the SoccerWise page, Discord, which again, you can subscribe to the Patreon. Or maybe it was in the chat. Regardless, I'll say it now anyway. This is my point. That I've flippantly said things like, Jim turned down Atlanta United. And I don't know if that was completely widely known. He wasn't offered the job. But from my understanding, it was made very clear to him, if you interview, the potential at the end of this is you're the highest paid coach in the league. You're our number one target. You're our guy. We want you. And he politely declined that. If Jim Curtin is turning down that job for that money with that owner and that front office and that flexibility on the roster, there is not a job that he's about to jump at, let alone the Sporting Kansas City one. So all of my reasons for that, there is no reason to talk about potentially Jim Curtin for this job. And this would be a hilarious clip if in a month from now he has a press conference. But funny, ironic that I did this whole spiel to let's not waste time talking about Jim Curtin. And this is why. And then I did it for 7 minutes.
This is why we did the podcast and we didn't start the consulting firm.
Oh,
we'd have to charge someone for all that time you just talked.
No, but maybe that'd be better because then it's working by the hour in construction.
But no one would hire us, and that would be the other problem. I, though, would add, and what I was sort of getting to was, I think the rest of that list of experienced people who could be the head coach, I think a lot of them say no right now because it's not a great situation to go into without a CSO in place. Now, ownership can say we're the CSO, and both Mike Burns in his role now or whoever ends up also going into that front office, I don't know how that will work, and the coach will both report into us, and that's how we're going to set things up. That's not how most clubs are set up. And so I think you go back into a waiting game, which is where you got to figure out the roles you need. You have to figure out who gets hired. You have to figure out what the org chart is. And then at that point, you have to go through interview processes and find people. And so we can throw out names. I think Josh Wolf's been thrown out pretty quickly. Makes a lot of sense. Gio Savarese, of course, going to get thrown out. Makes a lot of sense as well. I've got some Adrian Heath texts from people, so you could say his name as well.
Sounds like you don't want to say his name. That sounded like you put that to somebody else to say his name. Somebody else say his name.
I don't know. That feels
I would like that. I wouldn't mind it.
A little far-fetched me, but it could be. Laurent Courtois, of course, would get mentioned because he got let go last weekend, so he's available. There are a couple names in all of that. I can't see this getting done anytime soon. So you end up in a situation just like what just happened in Austin, right? Rodolfo Borrell took over. Josh Wolf was not as hire. So he eventually, as things struggle, they part ways, he goes out, he gets his coach. That's the way most sporting directors work, is they want someone on their soccer brain, they want someone with their background, whatever it is that they're looking for from a coach. It's very rare that it comes from two people who are hired separately. And if it does happen in some worlds, a lot of times they're both like Chris Albright and a Pat Noonan, who are from the same background and have the same connections and sort of are going to do a project together. So we can go through names and lists and all of that as people.
Dudes naming dudes. Hell yeah.
Yeah, we can do that over the next few months because I think it's going to come up for a while. I don't think it's going to get solved anytime soon. For the team on the field, they host St. Louis this weekend. So for the first time since 2009, without Peter Vermes on the sideline, they're going to host a St. Louis team who's also struggling in what is a pretty big rivalry match. They then host Portland the following weekend, and then they travel to San Jose and FC Cincinnati to close out the end of April. So those are the next 4 games for this team. I watched back again the Dallas game. They score. They give up 2 goals within 5 minutes. They go down 2-1. It's a lot of what I've said about KC. I like Sulimov. I like some of what you see from him. Helps create the goal. I like some of what you see from Jake Davis. Montagosier has talent. Joveljic, can finish. There's pieces to like. I don't know how different Kerry Zavagnin can put it all together, but you'd hope if you get a new coach bump of like effort and energy because you have to, and a change up of the environment, that maybe you can be a little bit more competitive. It's actually probably a good thing to have this St. Louis game this weekend. If you're going to say like, oh, it's a new season, let's restart things. Having a high energy game is probably a good thing. And a win there probably feels bigger than just a standard win in an MLS game.
Sure. And yeah, that could all be true. This is not a serious team for 2025. Like, they don't, like, again, I all the things you said you like, I agree with that. They don't have a defensive structure. The personnel from goalkeeper to 6, those back 5-6 spots, I don't think that they're anywhere close to being a serious team. And again, maybe they go on a run. MLS, 9 teams out of 15 in each conference make the playoffs. It's early. There's plenty of games left. That's all possible. I think it's unlikely. But I don't think that it would solve anything if they snuck in a 9th or whatever, right? Like, I still think that this needs a pretty serious defensive overhaul.
Let's move on to our next big topic, because as if Peter Vermes being let go is not big enough, we also potentially have an ownership change for what would be the, second time in 5 years in Salt Lake City. Yeah. The reports came out, I think via Sportico, that RSL and the Utah Royals, of course, Real Monarchs, owned underneath all of this, are on the verge of being sold from David Blitzer and the Blitzer Group to the Miller family. The Miller family owned the Utah Jazz from 1986 to 2020 when they sold it to Ryan Smith, who is currently the minority owner of RSL and the majority owner of the Utah Jazz, where I think the Millers are minority owners. Not really sure how all of that works. And of course, David Blitzer owns a ton of other sports ventures around the world. The reports are that the Miller family will become the majority owner of both RSL and the Royals, with Blitzer staying as a minority owner inside the club. I would assume part of that has to do with Blitzer's soccer group staying connected. So I would assume there's some desire to stay a part of the link to the other clubs that he owns, which are Augsburg, Brøndby, ADO Den Haag, Beveren, Estoril Praia, and Alcaron in Segunda. That is like an absurd grouping of soccer teams. They are all very similar, which are like kind of a team you've heard of in a kind of good soccer country, sometimes second division, sometimes standard first division, like competitive but not super high level. So all of that is a part of this. And the reports coming out are that David Blitzer originally bought the team for $400 million. He, with that, got Real Salt Lake, Rio Tinto Stadium, Real Monarchs, the training ground, which is one of the best in the country, and the option for the discounted expansion fee that they used to go and purchase the Utah Royals and bring them back into NWSL after the original team had moved on to Kansas City, which is now the KC Current. And then the belief is that Real Salt Lake is now worth $525 million and the Royals are worth $70 million. So in total, you're pushing around $600 million, which is like not that huge a jump because 400 million and NWSL expansion teams are now worth 110. It's like kind of where you'd expect it. Either way, this was a team that was pushed to be sold in 2020. Blitzer finally closed in 2022. To now turn around and sell it again in 2025 is interesting times, I guess you could say, in Salt Lake City.
Yeah, this is it's been a weird one, right? So this has been in the works obviously for a bit. They are like, I knew that they were close to a deal to being agreed to be sold. I didn't know where it was. So the Miller family, like you said, with that they sold the Jazz that Ryan Smith bought. And what I was told is Blitzer is still going to be involved. Don't know about Ryan Smith, so it sounds to me that the Miller family comes over to take a majority, Blitzer becomes minority, and then Ryan Smith would be out. That's as it was described to me, with the caveats that nothing is totally done yet, and things are still being worked through. I know it's been closed for the better part of a month, so it's an interesting one. It's unfortunate because, as you said, not just that the team got sold, it was the way it was getting sold last time because Delroy Hansen was forced to sell the team just because of bad things. And it took a while. The team was shoestring budget for a couple years. Remember, Freddie Juarez was the manager, left to take an assistant coaching job at Seattle because being the assistant in Seattle was more attractive than being the head coach in RSL because of all of the unknowns. So that is the backdrop for Blitzer and Smith taking over. The fans went through that tough time. They still showed up. The team somehow was still competitive on the field, which is a credit to Pablo Mastroeni, which is a credit to the front office. Elliot Fall and Kurt Schmidt was still there, and now Kurt Schmidt is CSO. The people in that building, for them to guide them to still be competitive, and then you go through that window, and the new owners do their new owner press conference, and we're going to up the spend. Yeah, everything sounds great. You win the press conference. And then for it to change again in a couple years, again, it doesn't mean it's going to be a bad thing. It could be a good thing, and particularly if Blitzer didn't want to be the majority owner or not. If Ryan Smith didn't want to be there anymore or not, then it is good if change happens. But I think you see it in Chicho Arango was bought for $6 million, and how much transfer fees have been spent beyond after that? Gonsalves was $3 million. That was, at least they were still doing that. But the whole press conference promise of raising spend, everything's gonna be better, we're doing all this, and then actually I think we're out, right? That's unfortunate for the fans, and I'm very hopeful that this will end up being a positive for the club, for the fans. It's just unfortunate that they've desperately needed a striker for a couple months, and when I was alluding to things are pretty difficult for the front office right now, this is why. They couldn't go out and spend the $12 million that they got from the Andres Gomez deal.
It's been brutal, and it's just been this waiting game of when are they going to actually finish their team, because they haven't done that, and that's been a huge sticking point for this season. I don't have a obvious chart or fix for any of this, but we've talked about ownership a couple times this year with the announcement around Vancouver selling, and obviously I was on a Montreal podcast on Sunday.
Obviously.
And they were asking about Montreal and what could happen there. And the only thing I feel somewhat strongly about is if you can have someone who's locally tied, it's an advantage. I think if you look at teams that have owners who don't know the market and don't really care for the market and purchase teams from further away, those are where you've run into more trouble. And I'm not saying Blitzer did anything wrong, but I think the lack of connection and desire to be around it and how quickly it all changes.
But hold on, really quickly, Blitzer was saying, in the initial press conferences, he's I wanted to do this, but he goes, I wasn't going to buy a team without a local investor with me, with Ryan Smith. So they had that, or they thought they had that. Yeah, but
Ryan Smith bought an NBA team on the side of that, and maybe is a little bit focused on that thing.
And also BYU. There's the connection between the BYU NCAA run and the Jazz and Ryan Smith.
So that whole thing, I remember Dunny doing a press or interview with them during the broadcast of the first game when they were owners. And they were sitting there, and it was nice, and they were into it. But they were talking about how big of sports fans they are, and how when they're together, it doesn't matter where they are, they're always checking on how their NBA teams are doing. And you're okay, cool. So you're at the soccer game and proving you like it by talking about the Philadelphia 76ers and the Utah Jazz. I don't know how this is going to end, and there you see how it turns around so quickly. I don't know if the Miller Group's any better. I could tell you very little about them, except the thing I read on Wikipedia, which was that they acquired the Utah Jazz in 1986 and then sold them in 2020 to Ryan Smith. I would assume they were approached originally about buying RSL because, as you told the story, Deloy Hansen was basically the owner, or the league was trying to find someone else to take the team because Deloy Hansen was considered no longer an acceptable owner in the league, and there wasn't really a ton of good mechanisms to push him out. And so you ended up in what was kind of a Sterling, Steve Ballmer situation of like, if we can just find a good offer, then this can go away and that person can take over the team and we don't have to, no one has to fight about it. So I assume the Millers were probably the start of that because they owned the Utah Jazz and they own the minor league baseball team in the market. So they are locally based, the biggest sports owners. I don't know. Maybe they got out of sports, decided they wanted to be in it. This is a cheaper way to come back in than, of course, trying to get back into the NBA or maybe the NHL. And so this is the way they choose to go about it. And this is 3-4 years later, their version of trying to get back into sports. I think for RSL, it's just like, again, frustrating that you have to go through this again. And just like the inefficiency of the time it takes to take over and set a plan and then have that plan play out a little bit and then be punched in the mouth and decide where do we actually want to go from here and which road do we want to take and who do we want to be. That all, I think, ends up being frustrating. Maybe the hope is if Blitzer stays connected and his soccer group stays connected, because there are people who work inside that soccer group that are not specifically at the clubs and can give a little bit of expertise, that maybe that speeds things up and maybe that makes it a little bit better for RSL. On the signing side, before we get into some games, Ryan Kent went official for the Seattle Sounders. We talked about it last week. He is signing for the rest of 2025 with a club option for 2026. So a pretty ideal contract for the Seattle team to get to test them out this year. Hopefully he can fill in for some of what they're losing in Paul Arriola. And then if it's successful enough, you already have the term set for next year. And if not, both parties can part ways. And then Chicago Fire have signed an under-22 initiative player, a Ivory Coast central midfielder from the Portuguese second division. I have zero idea how to say this. I have not heard anyone say it. Tom, you got me?
Jay Javila. Okay.
What do you make of this signing and sort of how this came about for this team?
Yeah. It's from what I was told, was something in the region of $4 million in terms of transfer fee. So it's a significant investment. And I think we're seeing more and more, particularly the bigger spending teams, using the U22 initiative on a guy who's turning 22 next month, who's already had something like 100 career appearances, and for a significant fee rather than $2 million for an 18-year-old who kind of just broke into a team, right? So we're seeing more and more 21, 22-year-olds on the U22 initiative, and then they stay on the U22 initiative for a few years. It's teams trying to use it on, like, it's always going to be a roll of the dice, even this signing too. You can mitigate risk by going a little older, by going with a little bit more experience, with more data and everything else. It's still going to be a risk. That's the nature of this mechanism. So that's what I have on this one. He's played in the Portuguese second and third division. They needed another central midfielder. The good news is they have like a starting group. They have enough players where it's not like, oh my God, he immediately needs to come. He immediately needs to start. And even if he's playing bad, well, we don't have any other options. So these are the ones that I like. And I think in the makeup of the Chicago Fire group, if he hits, that's going to be really, really good. They spent $5 million on Fede Navarro back in the day. So they've done this before in putting kind of a significant fee into the U22 initiative into a central midfielder. So I've got high hopes. I trust this front office, the scouting department and everything else, and Berhalter to kind of put him into the team. Nobody goes 100% on signings, but I'm giving it the benefit of the doubt for sure.
He's played in the UAE second division, Portuguese third division, and then Portuguese second division.
Wild ride on transfer market there.
It is a very weird route to get to this point. I thought it was interesting in the press release about this, and like you can read into this stuff however you want. It's Greg Broughton, right?
Yeah.
The sporting director underneath the chief football officer, Greg Berhalter, talked about how like great it was to work with the club specifically, and how they're hoping it leads to a future. My guess is that they're trying to create connections with other clubs, and this is Portugal, a great youth developer, and a place then also where you get players coming in from outside of Europe to try and get into Europe for the first time. Maybe they see this as a door to potential other signings as well. Obviously, this is the team that signed John Duran, which ended up being arguably the most successful signing in MLS history when it comes to a transfer point of view, with the sale to Aston Villa and then the money on the knock-on effect from going to Saudi Arabia. So it seems to fit a bit of that model. The hope being that if Berhalter's there long enough and was the one who identified this player, that he fits into a style and there's a clear idea of how he could be a part of this team going forward. I think a little unfortunate this weekend for Chicago, the 1-1 draw against Montreal. A little bit of a new coach bump. I thought Montreal played with a little bit more spark, pushed the game a little harder. Dante Sealy got the goal, pretty well deserved, playing on the front foot. Zinkernagels looked really good, so you talk about hitting on signings. That's been a good one so far. Jonathan Bamba looks really, really good in the things he's great at and then doesn't do the other stuff. He basically doesn't shoot. He doesn't try and get in on goal himself. He doesn't try and create chances for himself, but he's been dangerous helping press, and he's a menace down the left wing. And so there's a clear way this team's playing, and I think Zinkernagel's figured it out in terms of when to come in field, become another forward, sort of hoover up chances around Hugo Kuipers.
I agree. Yeah, this is it's been a really good start to the season. Again, I was hoping to see a win over Montreal at home. Again, this is MLS. Like, we can do this all the time where, things happen. Like, this doesn't need to be a big negative on Chicago because they didn't win a home game that they should have won. But just with their strong start, the momentum was really building, and now the schedule gets a bit harder. So we'll see how things continue to evolve with the Chicago Fire team. Like, they're at Red Bulls, home to Miami, first Cincinnati, at Nashville. I can keep on naming teams, but because I was trying to wait until when does this light up. So over the next looks to be like 11 games, they're playing only teams that I'm either firmly expecting to be in the playoffs in the East or pretty close, right? Like, it's Red Bulls, Miami, Cincy, and then there's Orlando, Atlanta, Charlotte. This is it's going to be a difficult run, and we'll see, I guess, what they're made of or what's going to happen with this team. But I'm bullish, and again, I had them before the season as a playoff team, and nothing that they've done has changed my mind on that.
I like Barroso. I think that's one they've hit on as well. Nika4 in the chat had this comment, and I marked this down in my notes as well. So Jonathan Bamba got subbed off in like the 90th minute. He comes off the far sideline at Soldier Field, Giant Stadium. Weather is terrible. He starts signing autographs in the tunnel while the game is finishing up, and then he goes up the tunnel. The way he was signing autographs was not like I'm marching off the field and I'm pissed. Like, it felt like he kind of was like, I'm already here. I'm not going to go back over there to come back here. But I also noted that and thought it was a little weird.
While you're needing a goal.
Yeah, so just something to watch out for, I guess, and any potential in that.
Later.
We were going to do some big takes from the weekend and some big things that stood out to us. That can all be one of them. I think the big one for me right now is that Thiago Martins needs to hire Messi's security guy, because the one group of people I wouldn't want to piss off is the goalkeeper union, and they are out for blood. Thiago Martins,
it was his fault,
in the sniper rifle right now.
As he should be.
For all goalkeepers.
That was, and again, I'm going to steal something that Doyle wrote. Doyle said that he talked to a former professional goalkeeper who said, I would fight him in the locker room for trying to show me up like that. And that distracts from the point. Like, one, you shouldn't be treating a teammate like that. But two, that was Thiago Martins' fault. You have Emmanuel Latte-Lot on your back. Matt Freese isn't close to you. Kick the ball away. And then don't stand there and scream at the goal. Like, that was your fault, pal. Like, what are we doing? That bothered me again, the way he handled it. And, like, not to use this as a vehicle.
Captain, too.
The captain, DP center back, who's been fine, but, like, he's not Walker Zimmerman of 2022.
Now we're tearing him
but it's like, all right, bro. Like, all right, you wanna be, bro. If Matt Freese wasn't the goalie last year, I don't know if they make the playoffs. Like, maybe not that drastic, but he was one of the best players in the league.
Yeah.
Oh, and like, it's I don't know how many. Like, did Thiago Martins, or was this somebody else who literally passed the ball into his own goal?
It was Martins.
So should Matt Freese have just ran up and screamed at him and just gesticulated, "This is your fault"?
That one was,
give me a break,
that one was a crazy one where he hit like a weird, softly hit ball. I think it was at Citi Field, and Sean Johnson was outside the goal and had to chase it back and doesn't get there. I was taught in
So
both situations, by the way. One, you never call the goalie because the goalie's the one who sees the whole field, so the goalie decides.
Yep.
That's, I think, what all goalies that have reached out to me.
Yep.
Again, goalkeeper union is out for blood right now. That's what they've all said is like, you don't make the call. I make the call. And so if once I've not, and this is the tough part, Freeze doesn't come. Martins is holding off the ball, holding off Latte Lot to the point where the ball hits him in the chest. At that point, you're taking a touch. So you might as well take a touch. And it's the same. And then I was taught as well, you don't pass back to a goalkeeper inside the post. You just safely do it on the outsides of the post. So if that happens or they make a mistake, whatever, it doesn't go in the goal. So yeah, you can kind of throw those on there if you want. What's amazing about this conversation as well is it was about 20 minutes after, 15 minutes after we were about to have a week of Atlanta is a tire fire. They're down 3-1. Sam Jones has taken victory laps on how he came on the show and said it could all blow up in their face and wasn't sure. And like, that's where the convo was. This was an NYCFC team up 3-1 in 53 minutes at Atlanta with a fairly full strength Atlanta group on the field. Keaton Park scores one of the tougher own goals you'll ever see, right? Sliding clearance attempt from like way far away from goal. That goes in. And then Miguel Almiron sparks the rest of the game. And I said yesterday you could feel his DNA on the field. He looked like 2018 Miguel Almiron, and I think that's kind of one of the first times we've seen that. And so even with the mistake and the gift, it was 3-3 at the time. I think all of the energy of that game shifted really quickly. And for Atlanta, it was huge because if Ronnie Dyla loses to his old team in that way at home, 3-1, whatever it is, I think it's going to be a really tough week for Atlanta.
I agree, and just like how defensively frail, and like obviously they scored 4 goals, they still gave up the 3, and like that's still going to be a thing that they need to solve. But it feels a lot better to try to solve it after a heroic comeback win. Giving up too many goals, the goals that they're conceding are so easy. It's too easy. It needs to be better. The midfield is too easy to play through. I liked Moranchuk on the ball a little bit deeper because that solved some space issues up further up the field. But like, you're not playing a double pivot of Moranchuk and a Johnny Fortune. I don't even know if you're doing it in like a 4-3-3 with, Click or Sleece there, and then you have to take off another attacker. Or not, actually not really, whatever, but just like dropping Moranchuk back. Like that could help will help with possession and maybe getting more out of Moranchuk, but it's not going to help defensively. And that is the biggest thing that they need to address. Like, I think Ronnie Dyla said it in his press conference. Like, I'm not worried about the goals. We're going to score goals. It's defensively, and that's what they need to fix. And look, that doesn't go away because they won, but that's what we would have been talking about. It would have been a full blown meltdown if that's how it ended. For me, Colorado cooked. Georgi Mihailovic is legitimately a best 11 type player. And I said this last year too. But, like, the structure seems even better now around him. And Zach Steffen has been really, really good. The center back pairing of Chidozie Awaziem and Andres Maxu, and then the addition of Josh Atencio in that midfield and continued growth from Ali Larraz. This is a very good team. I do wish that they were able to upgrade on the wings, but Teddy Gurupietro hasn't debuted for this team because he's injured. Maybe he's the upgrade. And regardless, if Georgi Mihailovic stays fit all season and continues playing like this, exactly like this or somewhere within the region of this, Colorado are going to be one of the better teams, one of the best teams probably in the West, that is very wide open from the top through the middle, pretty much everywhere towards the bottom, right? So this is a year where Colorado, with this formula, with this guy leading the team, can be very, very good in the West.
I watch a lot of Colorado games, and normally my notes in the first 15 minutes say Kevin Cabral's pushing the game. He's a huge factor, but can't finish anything off. And end at some point in my notes saying, I can't believe Kevin Cabral still starts for this team. And that's not like a spending issue. Omir Fernandez is more productive when he's on the field for this team in the same role than Cabral is. And Ted Gurupietro is supposed to be that player. And so maybe that's the fix. It feels like they're starting games from behind because they insist on starting Cabral. And like, as I said, I get it on eye test. You watch him play when he's aggressive and taking players on and trying to be dangerous and helping lead the press, and he's a huge outlet. And it never ends well, and they continue to need subs to come off the bench and help change the game because of that. And so I don't know how long you can stick with that. A lot of the other stuff, though, is really fun to watch. I was in the Discord talking about Ali Larraz, who has a ton of sauce to his game. I love him. I like Cole Bassett. I love what I'm seeing from Georgie. I think Rafa Navarro plays his role really, really well. And if you give him runners, he'll be a chance creating danger. And if not, he can finish off chances as well in the box. So it was a good weekend for Colorado as well, coming off the Portland loss, which it was like, okay, is this a flash in the pan, or is this going to take this team down at their knees? And it didn't. So I think that was a really important one and a really big moment from that one. Anything else stand out to you from the weekend that you want us to talk about?
I mean, I don't know how long or how much more we want to do. I could, like, Portland, big win. Like, again, home at Houston right now, the state that Houston's in.
Yeah, it's a must win.
But they needed to keep these points, and they did. So, job well done. They need to just keep, again, treading water till you keep getting, again, DaCosta, I think, is very good. Waiting for Jonathan Rodriguez. Again, when all the pieces kind of come back, when you feel like, because, again, this whole season has been about adding one more guy every week, seemingly. From DaCosta coming in to a couple injuries, like, they were killed by attacking injuries in the preseason. Yeah. It's really difficult to build up that way. So as long as the wheels didn't fly off, then they're going to be fine. So that's one. And then, like, San Diego LAFC was crazy. I don't know if you have any strong thoughts. I'll cede it to you.
It was an experience to watch that game.
It's a fever dream, dude.
And you're like 20 minutes in and you're like, how good is San Diego FC? And I don't think that really went away, right? LAFC, the first goal is like one of the best strikes of the year, and there's no way CJ Dos Santos is going to save that. And you could argue about closing space a little more, but like that's the 1 in a million strike. And then LAFC get the late goal in the first half. I would have been fascinated to watch this play out if Igor Jesus doesn't get the red card, because that's where San Diego, okay, now you've given up 2 goals. You go into the locker room. You haven't won yet at home. How do you feel? How does this team take pressure? And I think a lot of that went away because LAFC didn't have the pieces. But I said on yesterday's show, the way they struggled against Austin, I thought LAFC would be able to do similar things. And San Diego refound themselves as a compact shape. So they were not stretched and able to be played over and played through. And then inside of that, they refound their possession that makes them dangerous, and playing into tight spaces and always having a second option and being able to create chances from all of that. And like, yeah, Hugo Lloris gives them a little bit of a gift, but LAFC are a tough team to get 3 points off of. And so for, again, an expansion team, it feels like Super Mario Brothers, like this boss, this boss, this boss. I think LAFC at home was a big one for this team to win.
And like looking at the starting 11, like to even go back to the macro sense of like on our depth charts, like going into the season, there is at least 3, if not 4, maybe 4 or 5 players that like we didn't think was in their best 11. Like Valakari was a false 9. Alex Mighton got a start, right? Godoy has been really good for this team. I personally thought that he was going to be more rotation veteran, right? Like he's been really important for this team. He's been very good. So it's not
Godoy
just
loves an expansion season. Every expansion team should be putting just like already allocate the allocation money that you're going to be giving so that Godoy will come play for you.
But so even beyond this, like I think that we thought it was like, all right, like, hey, you don't know exactly how this is going to look in practice and in theory. But, all right, I can see a scenario where Chucky Lozano is just incredible. And he's like, San Diego's Vela in their expansion season. And they're winning. And, Luca De La Torre with more responsibility, right? And, the back line, Andres Reyes, who we thought was going to be a star, right, with Patty McNair. All of the ways that you would say this is how this team is going to be good beyond, like, the possession-based ethos that they're doing very well at. There's, like, this isn't exactly how we saw the pathway forward. So I think that's impressive, too, where – again, I don't know if this was exactly their plan A for how everything's working out, but they're getting I know that Valakari as a false 9 was not their plan A,
right? And
they're adapting along the way, and they're doing really well. So I've been really, really impressed with them. I'll do one more to say that.
For anyone who didn't know, Chucky Lozano came back.
Yes.
In this one, came off the bench.
Yes.
Which was big for them. And then LAFC we're going to talk about in just a moment because we're going to do a little CCC convo as well as the reports about Club World Cup.
Yeah, okay, then we don't even need to go deep on this. It is still too early in the season to take too much away from expected goal difference numbers and all that, but it is worth pointing out, Minnesota United, first in the league right now in expected goal differential. They have the most XG in the league. They have had a softer schedule than, probably the average one, if you look at the games. I think this is legitimately one of the best teams in the West as well. And again, going back to the Colorado conversation, the West is so wide open. that, like, why not Minnesota to come towards the top or at the top, right? And I think we're going to learn more about them as the month and two goes on here. But a lot of people, including us, were high on Minnesota coming into the season, and that's what we've seen.
Not only was their schedule soft, the field was soft this weekend. It was a swamp in Minnesota.
Yeah, that looked gross, dude.
I think it was delayed coming out of halftime because they were trying to like clean it up or whatever weather was flowing through. I mean, the weather everywhere was a train wreck this weekend, and it was like really tough to watch a lot of these games. It's really tough to take a lot from a lot of these games, but it was important, and the points count all the same. Let's talk about all of this other stuff going on. So for LAFC, they play against Inter Miami on Wednesday in CONCACAF Champions Cup. That game's 11:30 p.m. Eastern time. Vancouver Pumas is the opening game on Wednesday night. Vancouver hosting leg one, 9:30 p.m. Eastern time. So that's a 6:30 local kickoff, which is a little bit odd to me, but it's CONCACAF, so it makes a ton of sense. The LA Galaxy get things started tonight for MLS teams. They play Tigres at 11:15. Luckily, Dejan Joveljic not on the field to like score 5 goals against them, but it will still be a tough one for an LA Galaxy team that has not won a game yet in MLS this season. And America Cruz Azul is the opening game in CONCACAF Champions Cup quarterfinals later tonight. The reports, let's start here, coming out, I believe, from at ESPN, it was Jeff Carlisle and Lizzie Benchero, was that LAFC and Club America will have an opportunity in a one-game playoff to determine the replacement team for León at the 2025 World Cup. So León, we've mentioned on this show, it is understood is being removed from the Club World Cup because they share ownership with Pachuca, and both teams are in. And FIFA does not allow shared ownership groups to play in the same competition. So they were told to fix it, which the understanding was to sell one of the teams. Grupo Pachuca chose not to do that, and so Club León was the one pulled out. Don't really know the reasoning behind why that team was chosen. And then my guess is LAFC finished second in the CONCACAF Champions Cup that year to León, and Club America finished second in Liga MX. So therefore, they're being allowed to play each other. I don't know 100% why that is. And so there is the potential that MLS might have a third team in this Club World Cup.
So FIFA confirmed to myself and Ben Jacobs, yes, this is the plan, assuming that Club León lose their appeal. They're going to that early May, I believe that's going to be set, to try to stay in the tournament. But FIFA are going to planning for Club America versus LAFC. The rationale is, well, LAFC lost to Club León in the CONCACAF Champions Cup final, which was how León qualified for this tournament. And Club America are the highest team in the coefficient. In the
Right.
CONCACAF.
That's what it was, yeah.
It just coincidental that Club America is the biggest team in this hemisphere, and that LAFC is another big brand with big stars. I'm sure that's just all coincidental, mind you, and I'm sure that they didn't pick the teams and then find the reasons to go backwards. I'm sure that if Real Salt Lake finished lost in the final of the CONCACAF, they would have this opportunity. I'm sure. So we'll see what comes of this. I'm just glad it's not Al Nassr, because I just kind of figured that that's where this was going to end. Shout out to Alajuelense for raising this issue and fighting a good fight, hoping that they were going to be the ones that got in because they won. What's the tournament called? Whatever the Europa League is for CONCACAF champions.
Yeah,
I'm blanking on it. Regardless, shout out to Alajuelense fighting the good fight.
I'd be stoked about that, by the way.
They're pit. They're like, we racist. It should be us. And FIFA's like, good idea. Let's do a mini tournament.
Yeah.
Maybe that's how it's going to be. It's going to be Alajuelense and then Al Nassr, and then it's going to be a 4-team tournament to qualify for the 32-team tournament. And then at that point, maybe you could just do a 16-team pre-qualifying tournament to get to the 32-team tournament. And then maybe expand that next year to 64, and then who knows?
Crew fans are going through it a little bit. We've got some in the chat right now because Crew was towards the top of those standings and had been on the verge of getting, being the number one team coefficient-wise.
Don't try to follow it logically is all I'm... And it's like I was talking to Ben... Jacob, it was last week, he goes, oh, dude, what do you think about Alajuelense? I was like, I don't have any thoughts. He goes, well, what if, he's like, do you want to reach out to Philadelphia and see if the Philadelphia, and I was like, it doesn't matter if they think they deserve it or not. It's going to be whatever the hell FIFA decides. And so I'm not doing any legwork on this.
I will say I am looking forward to the Copa de Campeón, non-Campeón de Copa that will be played at SoFi Stadium between LAFC and Club America for the opportunity
At
to
3:30
play at the
local time.
Club World Cup. Also, I think the games are already set. I think Club Leon's like playing in Nashville. So it will be interesting that then LAFC, if they get in, will be playing only on the East Coast, where Seattle and Miami are hosting as American-based clubs that are hosting this competition. LAFC, I assume, would not get that same opportunity. I don't think they can change the schedule this late in the game, but also you never know. And so it would be a huge deal for LAFC. To be a part of this is massive.
Yeah.
I think what we saw was if you
$9
can
million.
get a result in the group stage and participate in this thing, you're going to get like $2 million.
Dude, if you go to the group stage and go 0 for 3 and get killed, you still get like $9 million. And then it's $1 million for a draw or $2 million for a win.
That's what we should get paid. We should get paid $2 million for a draw. That's what we deserve. I was going to look at the schedule just to remind myself who Leon is playing, and while doing that, I'm going to talk
Chelsea,
out loud.
Chelsea, a team from Tunisia, and I already forget the third team.
Okay.
I was with our pals on Lobbing Scorchers this morning, and we were talking about this because Noah and Ari are just rooting for. Oh, cool! This is another final that we can root against LAFC in.
Flamengo, Esperance. Esperance de Tunis is the team from Tunisia, but they go by Esperance. And Chelsea. So it's not an easy group either. The games right now.
You could get one result.
Maybe. The games are scheduled right now. So it's Atlanta against Chelsea would be the opener for this team that gets in. LAFC or Club America, if this ends up being what happens. Then Geodis Park for the second game against Esperance. And then you'd play Flamengo in Orlando, which is going to be an absurd crowd.
Oh, it's going to be beautiful.
I think Orlando is the biggest Brazilian community in the U.S., and these teams don't really come and play competitive games. So that would be pretty wild to be a part of. But either way, I think LAFC, right, what they've done over the last few years, what they've done since their creation, has pushed themselves to be elevated onto a platform like this. Seattle earned their way in. Inter Miami is in, however you choose to read that. For LAFC, it would be a huge moment to be a part of this. And so this is like this big chance. And as you said, for everyone who's a hater out there, it's another opportunity to root against LAFC in a final, which they've become experts at playing in. Going up against Miami in this quarterfinal, what do you make of that matchup right now where these two teams stand?
It's going to be interesting. I think that this is going to be like having such a big game with big stakes this early in the season, and these two teams that these are the two teams in my like preseason predictions of my MLS Cup, or at least they're going to be in the mix, both of these teams. So having games of consequence, having again the chance for either of these teams to try to win this competition, and I think that these are going to be two worthy ones. I don't know over two legs like what exactly to make of this. Is LAFC going to be able to really kind of threaten Miami in transition? Miami have done really, really well this season, pretty much after the opening week or two of having more control. And the transition to the Javier Mascherano era has been pretty seamless and really quick. And it's been very impressive, both with him and his style and what he wants from the team and the new signings that have come in. So Miami, I was worried that they might start a little slow. They're not, man. Like, they're in kind of like mid-season form. They're in, they're playing pretty close to a peak or whatever their peak would be. So Miami have to be taken seriously for this tournament, and LAFC have a big job on their hands in this series. And I wish I had something more interesting to say. I'm just really looking forward to these two games because these are two of the best in the league in MLS. And either one, whoever gets to the semifinal is going to be a great representation of the league and have a legitimate chance to win this tournament. Miami probably more than LAFC, just based off the form and obviously having Messi and everything else. But LAFC, we know that if they hit their A+ game, they can hang with anybody in this region.
Yeah, I think for Miami, it was a really good sign the way they handled Philly this weekend of like a direct style, a non-possession style to prepare yourself. But the individual quality and attack for LAFC is a little different than for Philadelphia. And so while I thought it was a good test proven this weekend going into this tie, it is still a challenge out there of how do you deal with Bouanga and Ken Tillman get turned up field and running at you at pace and Under and all of that. So there's a huge potential for LAFC, I think, in this. But at the same time, they have to play open. Like, they have to go out and try and win this game. If they try and stay in a tight block and sit deeper and give Miami a ton of possession, I don't think they're going to have the opportunities to win this game because right now, with the way Miami have cleaned things up in the back, they're not making self-inflicted mistakes.
Correct.
And over time, they will break you down. Some of the stuff Miami's doing is absurd. Like the way Jordi Alba is saving balls on the end line in the 91st minute of games. Like they are fully committed to this. There's a ton of talent in there. I thought Redondo was really good against Philadelphia. And that's one of those huge question marks is like, who's going to cover ground and do work around Busquets and behind the attacking front and all of that. And you assume Messi will start this game. Like came off the bench. He was good for 35 minutes this weekend. That probably means he's good to start. And so that, again, puts you on your heels and puts you on your back foot. And LAFC, I think, need to get the win in this leg. And they need to open up the game to some extent and try and put Miami under pressure, especially early on.
And limit Miami to one. And limit Miami to one goal, honestly, because away goals still count in this competition, unlike the UEFA Champions League at the moment. So you have to remind yourself that and be careful because a 3-2 game, you come in with a +1, but that means a 1-0 on the road like kills you. So I think that's going to be fascinating too. Like you said, that they do need to step up. They if they try to defend deep, I think like you said, Miami will break them down. But they also can't be too vulnerable because a couple away goals really kills you.
Yeah. You assume Hollingshead back into the starting lineup after being rotated out this weekend. You assume Igor Jesus is starting all these games because he'll be suspended for the MLS game on the weekend. Obviously, a ton of talent in this LAFC team, a ton of talent in this Inter Miami team. This is, as you said, like just a really fun game for us to have. For Vancouver, this is a huge opportunity. Like Pumas struggling in the league, this is your chance to potentially go to a CONCACAF Champions Cup semifinal. This is the most winnable tie Vancouver has ever gotten in these stages of the tournament because they've been here before and they're always lined up against the Tigres and it's always difficult. And so Vancouver, as well as they've played, has to see this as this big chance.
For all the years that Vancouver got drawn with Tigres in the first round, in the beginning of February, 3 weeks before the Major League Soccer season started, all of that goodwill that they had to sit through, all of that bad karma, they deserve to be playing this Pumas team instead of another giant or a team that's in better form, like Club America or whatever, right? Like, so to your point, absolutely. And why not, man? Like, don't doubt this Vancouver Whitecaps team. I mean, dare I say, like, I'm expecting them to go through because of the states of where both of these teams are, which is probably the dangerous spot to be in. Once you give any expectations or have any hope, it goes away. But I don't know, man. I'm really hopeful for this Vancouver Whitecaps team. It's just been such a fun run at the start of the season. And getting to a CONCACAF Champions Cup semifinal would be awesome.
It would be incredible. And then you'd be lined up against an MLS team. So again, you talk about opportunity, you talk about winnable games. It was a brutal experience for Vancouver to have to go play Toronto in like hail. Jesus, I don't even know if it was rain at that point.
Miserable, man.
It was just one of those games where you're watching it and you're like, I don't want Vancouver to be here right now. Like, let them take this gun. Just put down a tie for both of them before it even starts. Go back. Let them get ready for this game. And you saw some rotation for Vancouver as well, trying to stay fresh for this one. This is such an exciting game for them. Huge opportunity. Those two games on Wednesday night and then tonight coming up, the Galaxy against Tigres. Galaxy at home. You talked about what you need to do at home and all of that. Tigres are going to give them the ball. Like, Tigres are not a ball-dominant team in moments like this. And so if the Galaxy are ever going to find their way, Painesville comes back this weekend. Christian Ramirez gets his first goal. If they're ever going to have a chance and find their way, it's got to be really good in this first game. They probably need a 2-0 win at a minimum coming out of this one. And that probably has to start with Gabriel Peck being the best player on the field. And your hope is if Painesville comes back and gives you a vertical threat and that starts to shift Tigres' defense a little, Peck starts finding the spaces that he was really good with last year.
I completely agree. That's the formula. And it's integral to get a positive result and probably a shutout in leg one. And we'll see where they go from there. But it's obviously been a struggle in 2025 for the reigning champs.
Someone in the chat says CJ Nagando has become one of their favorite players. Love CJ Nagando to the point in which didn't realize that he had no Canadian eligibility. I was like, when does this guy get called up? Turns out he's French, so he can't get called up to Canada, and that is a huge hit to all of my hopes and dreams. As well this week, US Open Cup. So matches tonight and tomorrow. Some big ones that I put down. Monterey Bay against El Farolito tonight. Charlotte Independence against Carolina Core, so a little USL MLS Next Pro. crossover. I find it harder to get excited about the next Pro 2 teams playing against full professional squads. It's exciting to see some young players in those settings, but from like a matchup point of view, there's not as much juice.
No.
Portland, Hearts of Pine, yes, are playing Hartford tomorrow, which is an awesome one. USL League One against Championship in that New England area. Chattanooga, the Chattanooga Derby is tomorrow evening as well. And then Des Moines Menace, many of our good friends, facing off against our fellow Owls in Union Omaha.
I know,
So
it's a tough one for us. Again, back-to-back years.
That's what we normally do. We're a big Union Omaha show here. We love our Owls. We obviously have enjoyed watching Des Moines Menace. My documentary has just been picked up, and so we're really excited about the potential there. So a lot of fun soccer to watch. We are going to be in the Discord all the time, watching it with everyone else. So if you don't already, subscribe to our Patreon. I'll be back tomorrow afternoon with Jordan Angeli to talk all things NWSL, as well as U.S. Women's National Team, which has the friendlies against Brazil coming up. And then Tommy and you will be back here on Thursday. So we'll have a ton to talk about. The CONCACAF Champions Cup to react to, as well as U.S. Open Cup, and whatever other news comes. If another team gets sold, 2 managers have been fired in 6 weeks so far in Major League Soccer, and that's why we like to be here at SoccerWise. Thank you to all of you in the chat for watching live. Thank you to all of you for listening to the podcast. Please go rate, review us, subscribe anywhere you follow us, and all those types of things. And we'll talk to you all again very, very soon.